My in-laws demanded that my husband and I give them our spare bedroom because they're retired and deserve care. When I refused, they moved in while I was at work, so I set a 3-day deadline for them to leave. 2 hours later, the police showed up. My name is Jess. I'm 32, I like my coffee strong and my boundaries stronger. And I married the gentlest man I know, Ethan, who can spend 20 minutes apologizing to a Roomba because he bumped it with his foot. We have a small, well-loved house with a postage stamp lawn that Ethan insists on mowing in perfect diagonal lines. Those parents, my in-laws, are Ron and Marla. If you met them at a cookout, you'd call them old school. If you saw them on a long road trip, you'd call them stubborn. Ethan is their only son, which, in Marla's mind, means the road to the center of the family goes through him and then funnels into whatever room I'm in. We also have exactly one spare bedroom, which I call the blue room, because the walls are a soft, calming blue that I painted myself one long weekend when Ethan was visiting his parents out of state. The storm began on a Tuesday evening, and I was chopping onions for chili when Ethan's phone rang. He put it on speaker because he was kneading cornbread dough. Marla's voice came in bright and sharp. "Hi, sweetie, put Jess on too." I said hello. Ron coughed in the background, which is what he does when he wants to make a sentence heavier without actually saying anything, and then said, "We've made a big decision." Marla bulldozed ahead. "We're retiring, effective immediately. We deserve to be cared for. We've earned it. So the logical next step is for us to move in with you and use that spare bedroom. We'll be very tidy. Your father and I have discussed it. We can pay a small stipend for groceries." Ethan went very still. I could feel the whole kitchen go quiet, like the house itself was listening. I was still holding the knife, which is not the posture you want when you're about to say something that will not be received as gentle. I set the knife down carefully and said, "Marla, we've talked about this. We won't be living together. We can help with other arrangements." Silence, then a brittle laugh. "Jess, dear, you're misunderstanding. We don't need a discussion. We need a plan. We've worked our whole lives. It's time for our children to step up. We are not going into a facility to be warehoused among strangers." Ron coughed. Warehouse. Ethan, who can be conflict avoidant to a fault, tried to soften it. "Mom, Dad, we love you, but we're not set up to have you live with us. We can contribute to assisted living. We've budgeted for that. We've looked at options near your friends." Marla cut in. "We are not asking to be put away. Jess can keep her job. We'll keep to ourselves. We raised you. Now it's your turn." She always pressed that button. Duty, guilt, the ledger of who owes what. I took a breath. "We're not doing this. The answer is no. We have a plan. We've shared it. It's respectful and it's generous. And it's what we can sustainably do." The temperature on the call dropped. Marla's tone went metallic. "I see. So that's the kind of daughter-in-law you want to be." "I want to be one with healthy boundaries," I said, plain as toast. Then the call ended with a clipped, "We'll talk later." Ethan and I stood in the quiet. He looked miserable. "They'll cool off," he said. And he meant it, because in his family, winter always eventually turned to spring if you just waited and didn't touch anything. I wanted to believe him. I did. But our relationship has always had friction. The day I met Marla, she took both my hands, looked me up and down as if I was a moderately priced chandelier, and said, "You're very practical," which is code for, "You didn't show up in a lace dress and pearls like the daughters-in-law I imagined." Ron is quieter, but he walks around with the permanent facial expression of a pass-fail instructor at a driving test. Small nod when you do something right, pinched frown when you don't, grades never disclosed. When Ethan and I got married, we made a plan for the future. Part of that plan was elder care. We both work full-time, our house is small. My job sometimes means late nights and conference calls, and Ethan's work as a physical therapist is physically and emotionally demanding. We agreed, mutually, that when the time came for our parents to need more support, we would budget to help with an assisted living facility or in-home nursing care. We would visit, we would advocate, we would pay what we could. We would not combine households. We had this conversation multiple times with all 4 parents, but the conversations with Ron and Marla never landed. Marla would smile and say, "Well, we'll see. The way you talk to a toddler who insists they will grow up to be a dinosaur." She'd add little comments. "In our culture, the eldest daughter-in-law takes care of the in-laws. I am, somehow, both an only child and yet still the eldest daughter-in-law in her story. And we raised Ethan. The least you can do is let us be near our son." And my favorite, "What could be more important than family?" She'd say family like it was a trump card, like the mere word cleared the table. Ethan, bless him, would get this pinched look and try to translate. "Mom, Jess is not saying no to helping. She's saying no to living together." And I'd nod. "It's not personal. We want privacy. We function better with space. We can help in other ways." Ron would cough into his fist. Then he'd ask Ethan about his latest patient, as if the conversation had been a commercial break. We repeated this dance for a couple of years, during which time we saved for that eventuality. We even spoke to a financial advisor about it. We were ready. Then they called. For the next week, Marla sent messages like little darts, articles about caregiving as love, photos of Ethan at age 5 with captions like, "You used to run to me when you needed something." A few not-so-subtle comments about people who think money is more important than family. I never responded. Ethan tried. "Mom, we'll help you find a great place. We already researched." She sent a thumbs down emoji. We kept living our life, and then the house became a story I didn't recognize. 2 days later, I got up early, kissed Ethan on the cheek, and left for work with my tote bag and coffee, and a feeling that the morning would be an ordinary Thursday. On my lunch break, I glanced at my phone and saw a notification from our doorbell camera. Motion detected, then another. I ignored it. Our neighbor's cat loves our porch. A little later, another alert. I felt a prickle of unease and opened the app. The first clip was a delivery truck. The second was a familiar face. Ron, on our porch, squinting at the keypad, punching in the lock code we'd given them once so they could water our plants when we were out of town. Behind him, Marla appeared, regal as a queen with a rolling suitcase. They both disappeared into our house. I called Ethan. "Are you seeing this?" I asked. He sounded disoriented. "Seeing what?" "Our front door, your parents, the luggage, the mattress." Silence then. "Oh my God. Oh my God." He was at work too, with a patient scheduled. He whispered, I'll call them right now." When I got home at 6, the first thing I saw when I walked in was a new shoe rack by the door, with Ron's loafers and Marla's orthopedic Oxfords lined up like they'd lived there forever. The blue room door was closed. It used to never be closed. It used to be where I kept my sewing machine and the boxes of holiday decorations and the bookshelf with my paperbacks and the air mattress for when my cousin visits. Now there was a cheap brass hook screwed into the outside of the door and a locksmith's sticker near the handle that hadn't been there that morning. I walked into the kitchen like a sleepwalker and found the fridge bloated with groceries, jars of pickled beets, a gallon of whole milk we don't drink, a Tupperware mountain of leftovers I hadn't cooked. On the island, a note in Marla's flourish. "Jess and Ethan, we've arrived. Thank you for being so gracious. We changed the sheets in our room. Hope you don't mind. We'll handle our meals. We're not a burden. It's only right after all our years." I was standing there, the note in one hand, when Marla herself materialized in the doorway, smiling like a cat that had learned how to open doors. "There she is," she said, like I was late to a party. "Welcome home." Ron hovered behind her, holding a roll of painter's tape and a pen. He had already labeled the shelf in the hall closet linens, ours. "What is this?" I asked. My voice came out level, calm, scary calm. Marla spread her arms. "We moved in. Isn't it a relief? No more back and forth. We can settle. You don't have to worry about us out there alone." "You don't have a key," I said. She patted her purse. "You gave us one last year. We made a copy. Of course we needed to, in case of emergencies." "That was for watering plants while we were on vacation," I said, "not moving yourselves in." She smiled wider. "Jess, stop being so stiff. You'll give yourself wrinkles." She had already changed into slippers. Ron said mildly, "Your sheets are too cold. We put a flannel set on the bed." "That is not your bed," I said. I felt my blood in my ears, a roar I was holding back with every ounce of training I have in not screaming. "That is not your room. This is our house. You are not invited to stay." Marla's face tilted, pitying. "Oh, honey, you're being dramatic." "I'm being clear," I said. "Get out of our room." Ethan arrived then, breathless, eyes appalled. "Mom, Dad, you can't just..." He gestured at the house like words had failed. Marla went for the oldest play in her book, the limp. She put her hand to her chest and swayed. "Oh, I can't handle this. My heart." Ethan, the kind man who apologizes to robots, moved toward her. I held up my hand like a traffic cop. "Do not fall for this." Her limp disappeared. "I am a guest in your home," she said, indignation returning. "You're not a guest. You're a squatter with a key," I said. "You do not live here. Remove your things." Ron coughed. "Confrontational," he said, to the air. I took a breath. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to gather your bags and go to a hotel. Tonight. We will call you tomorrow and discuss options. We will help you find a place that meets your needs. We will not be living together." Ethan, torn, said softly, Maybe just for a few weeks, while we look." Marla clucked her tongue. "Yes, that's reasonable. We'll be very quiet. You won't even know we're here." I looked at my husband, my partner, the person who knows I talk in my sleep, and that I put the spoons upside down in the dishwasher, and I said, "Ethan, look at me." He looked. 2 weeks becomes 6 months becomes forever, I said. "We talked about this. We built our life on this boundary." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were different. "Mom, Dad, you can't stay." "Unbelievable," Marla said, hurt calcifying into spite. Jess has poisoned you. Okay, I said, more to myself than to them. Since you have chosen to ignore our very clear boundary, here is the boundary written in bold. I went to my office, shut the door, and did 3 things. 1. I took photos of everything. The labeled boxes, the new lock on the blue room door, the groceries in the fridge, the shoes by the door. I pulled the clips from the doorbell camera and saved them. I took pictures the way you do after a storm when you know the insurance company is going to ask for proof that there was ever a roof. 2. I secured anything valuable. I grabbed my jewelry box and the external hard drive with our documents. It felt paranoid and also like basic risk management. Trust but verify is cute until someone installs a deadbolt on your guest room. 3. I wrote a message. I created a group text with Ethan, myself, Marla, and Ron, and I added an email thread too, because if there is one thing Marla respects, it's a paper trail when she thinks it benefits her. My message was simple. Hi, Marla and Ron. We are not giving permission for you to live in our home. You must vacate the premises by Sunday at 6:00 p.m. That was 3 days from the moment I was typing. If you do not leave by then, we will contact an attorney and proceed with all legal remedies, and we will also change the locks. We are willing to support you financially in finding appropriate care or an apartment nearby, as previously discussed. This is not up for negotiation. I sent it by text and by email. My hands were steady. Ethan read it and nodded, jaw tight. We walked back into the living room together, side by side, a united front. Marla sniffed when her phone buzzed. We are not giving permission. Vacate the premises. Proceed with legal remedies. She looked up. You think you can threaten us in our son's home? Ethan said it before I could. It's our home, Mom. She hissed. Not if you treat your parents like this. Sunday at 6, I said. That's generous. Pack your bags. Ron scribbled something on a sticky note and stuck it to the hall mirror. Remember to pick up more milk. I took a picture of that too. That night we slept with our bedroom door locked. I could hear Marla's voice through the wall, raised in long, wounded waves. I made a note to call a lawyer in the morning and to ask a friend who's a cop what our options were if they refused. I didn't want to get anyone involved. I also didn't want to be naive. 2 hours after I sent the ultimatum, 2 hours, not 3 days, a police cruiser pulled up out front. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing mugs. Ethan was in the living room, scrolling through assisted living websites like they were a lifeline. The doorbell rang and Marla beat us to the door. She flung it open. Officers, she said, her voice quivering. 2 officers stood on the porch, one older, one younger. The older one had the patient face of someone who has seen a lot of domestic disputes, and has a laminated list of things he will say that stop them from exploding. The younger one looked like he was still learning how to stand with his hands near his belt without looking like he was about to draw a weapon. What seems to be the problem, ma'am? The older officer asked. Marla inhaled like she'd been underwater for days and had just come up for air. My son and his wife are trying to throw us out on the street, she said, and then she cried. Big, heaving, theatrical sobs. We're retirees, she wailed. They won't feed us. They're locking us out. They're emotionally abusive. Ron nodded solemnly and added a cough for punctuation. I stepped forward, hand up. Hi, I'm Jess. I own this house. Please come inside. The older officer tipped his head. We'll talk to everybody, he said, and his tone said he had said this sentence 1,000 times and would say it 1,000 more. We all shuffled into the living room. The house suddenly felt too small. Marla perched on the edge of the couch. Ron stood with his hands clasped, eyes down, the picture of aggrieved patience. Ethan sat in the armchair and looked like he wanted to disappear. The younger officer gestured to me. You said you're the homeowner? Yes, I said. We both are. Our names are on the deed. I'd already pulled out a folder and laid it on the table. Copies of the deed, a printout of the mortgage statement, the text and email I'd sent, and my phone with the doorbell footage, queued up to a still frame of Ron rolling a suitcase through our doorway at 1:15 p.m. The older officer nodded, businesslike. Okay, tell me what's going on from your perspective. I spoke slowly. My in-laws were told many times that we would not be living together and that when they retired, we would help them find and pay for appropriate housing or care. Today, while we were at work, they moved their belongings into our spare room without permission. They changed the lock. They have stocked our refrigerator and rearranged our home. We did not invite them. We explicitly told them no. I sent them written notice that they have 3 days to leave. They called you. They are claiming abuse. We have not abused them. We have not withheld food. Marla gasped. Listen to how she talks about us like criminals. I didn't look at her. All I want is for them to leave, and for us to solve this like adults, through appropriate channels. I am more than willing to help them find a place. I am not willing to have them live here. That's the whole story. The officers exchanged that, look, cops exchange when one is deciding whether the other will handle the legal explanation or the empathic one. The older officer took legal. Ma'am, he said to me, This is primarily a civil matter. We don't adjudicate housing disputes. We make sure nobody's in danger and nobody's property is being damaged. If you're saying they entered your home without permission and are refusing to leave, that can be a trespassing issue. But because they have some of their belongings here and you have a prior relationship, it gets complicated fast. If you want them out immediately, we recommend you talk to an attorney about the quickest legal route. In the meantime, we can do a civil standby if you want them to remove their things. Marla pounced. So you can't make us leave? The younger officer tried for empathy. Ma'am, it's not that simple. I kept my voice even. Officer, I understand you're not eviction court. I am not asking you to do anything outside your scope. What I am asking is that you note I am the homeowner. I have explicitly refused permission for them to live here, and I have asked them to leave within a reasonable time frame. I am willing to avoid pressing charges if they leave peacefully by Sunday at 6. I have the doorbell footage showing them entering today with luggage and movers. I have the written notice. I have the deed. I am happy to email all of this to whoever needs it. The older officer nodded. We'll note that in our log, he said. And we can tell them what you've told us. We can also let them know that if you ask them not to be here and they remain, you could pursue trespassing. Marla's eyes flashed. We are his parents. We have a right to be here. The older officer asked, do you have any written agreement with your son and daughter-in-law that you can live here? Family doesn't need contracts, Marla said. Family has love. Legal systems need contracts, the officer said, dryly but not unkindly. He turned to Ethan. Sir, do you want your parents to stay? All the air went out of the room. This was the question Ethan had been avoiding since he was 5, and learned how to change his facial expression to match the person talking to him. He looked at me. He looked at Marla. He looked at the officers. And then he did the bravest thing I've ever seen him do. No, he said. We've made it clear for years that living together is not an option. We'll help them find a place. But they cannot live here. It was like a bell tolling. A simple sound with 1,000 meanings. Marla's face went slack, then hard. After everything we gave you, she whispered. The younger officer stepped slightly in front of his partner. Ma'am, he said calmly, right now the best next step is for you to gather some essentials and find alternative lodging while you discuss this with your son and daughter-in-law. You can come back during daylight hours to gather the rest, preferably while they're home, and we can be present if needed so everyone feels safe. Ron, who had said almost nothing, said, This is humiliating. I said, It didn't have to be. You could have asked and respected our answer. You chose this. The older officer asked me quietly, Do you want to press charges for unlawful entry? I shook my head. My stomach was in knots. Not if they leave by the deadline. But I want it noted. He nodded. Noted. There were 10 more minutes of back and forth, during which Marla tried one more fainting spell. Ron did 3 coughs that sounded like punctuation marks, and the officers patiently restated that no one was being arrested, no one was being thrown on the street, and that they recommended things like a hotel and, quote, calling a lawyer in the morning. They also advised me that if things escalated, I should call the non-emergency number and request a civil standby while they removed their belongings, and that if anyone tried to prevent me from entering a room in my own home, that could change the nature of the situation quickly. Do not lock any interior doors that don't belong to you, the older officer said, looking directly at Ron and the new lock on my blue room. That can be considered tampering. You need to remove any locks you added. Ron's mouth pressed into a thin line. We'll get our things, he said stiffly. The officers left with a firm handshake and a good luck. Marla looked at me with an expression I can only describe as cold fury, wrapped in lace. We'll be gone, she said, but this isn't over. Sunday at 6, I said. Please don't slam the door on the way out. I wish I could say they packed their bags that night and left with dignity. Instead, we got the protest packing, where every move is a performance. Drawers opened with exaggerated size. Boxes were taped with long, agonized rips. Ethan and I moved around them like polite ghosts. We made dinner. We ate it at the small table in the nook, knees touching, forks scraping quietly. We said almost nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse right then. The next morning I called a lawyer. I explained what had happened. She whistled softly. You did everything right, she said. Documented, written notice, a reasonable deadline. If they're still there on Sunday at 6:01 p.m., call me. In the meantime, if they added a lock, you can have it removed. It's your house. Change the exterior locks after they go. I also called a locksmith and scheduled him for Monday morning, just in case. I secured the outdoor key box and changed the code. At noon, the police officer from the day before called to follow up. Just checking in, he said. We noted the incident. If you need a civil standby when they move things, call the non-emergency line. Saturday night, at 9:43 p.m., Ethan came to bed and lay beside me, staring at the ceiling. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry I didn't shut it down the second they suggested it. I'm sorry I even asked for a few weeks. I'm sorry I let it get this far. I rolled onto my side. You don't have to apologize for being raised by people who think boundaries are insults. You're unlearning it. That takes time and practice. Today you chose us, that matters. He exhaled so hard his chest rattled, and then he put his face in the pillow and cried. Quiet, private tears. I laid my hand between his shoulder blades and kept it there until he slept. Sunday came. At 4, they were gone. I stood in the hallway and looked at the blue room. The new lock had been removed under the officer's suggestion, and the door stood ajar. Inside, it looked almost like my blue room again. The air felt normal again. Ethan came to stand beside me. He reached for my hand. Therapy? He asked, like he was offering me a monogrammed robe. Yes, I said. Therapy. Couples? And individual, I said. You, to separate your mom's voice from your own. He nodded. Agreed. We sent one more message to Ron and Marla. We are glad you left by the deadline. We will not discuss moving in again. We will only discuss options for housing or care. If you re-enter our home without permission, we will pursue legal remedies immediately. Ron replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Marla replied with a paragraph about how we had broken her heart. I replied, we love you and we will help you find a place, and then did not engage with anything not directly about logistics. Ethan did the same. By Wednesday, we'd found a clean, bright, assisted living community 15 minutes from us, with a chef who makes meatloaf the way Ron likes, and a weekly chair yoga class that Marla pretended to hate but secretly enjoyed. We offered to pay a portion of the monthly cost. They accepted because the alternative was to keep losing a battle they'd already lost publicly. When we brought them to tour, Marla sniffed at the art on the walls and said, so modern, like the building had personally offended her with its good lighting. Ron counted the steps from the elevator to the dining room like he was memorizing a route through a labyrinth. In the hallway on the way out, Ethan squeezed my hand. Thank you, he whispered. For what? I asked. For not giving up on me while I figured out how to not give in to them, he said. I kissed the spot on his cheek where his beard doesn't grow. Always. It's been a few months now. The blue room is blue again. Ethan goes to therapy every Thursday at 4. I go every other Tuesday at 6. Together, once a month, we sit on a couch and talk about the way you can both love your family and refuse to be swallowed by them. We practice sentences like, I hear that you're upset, and this boundary is not changing, until they feel like muscle memory. Ron and Marla are Ron and Marla. They were furious for a while. They moved into the assisted living place. Marla made a friend named Dottie within a week, someone with a sharp bob and sharper tongue, and they sit together at lunch and critique the soup like judges on a cooking show. Ron discovered that the facility's library needed organizing and spent 3 days labeling the mystery section so thoroughly that the staff asked him to be part-time library captain, which is a title he now wears like a badge of honor. We visit once in a while with groceries and patience. That's the story. It happened like this. Demand, intrusion, deadline, sirens. It resolved like this. Officers, evidence, a calm voice, a firm line. And it continues like this. Sunday visits, therapy bills, locks that click, love that holds firm without giving an inch it can't afford. If you were hoping for the police to carry them out like a sitcom, I'm sorry. Real life is messier and also, I think, more satisfying.